Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the cult. And of course, on Fridays, we do happy hour on the cult. Happy hour is a stream that we do Fridays at 5 p.m. where we watch a full form woke training from beginning to end. We watch the boring bits. We watch the cringy bits because we want to know and truly understand what the woke left are saying when they're talking to each other, when they're training each other in the classrooms, in their teacher training, etc., etc., etc. And because we watch these things in their full form, and we've been doing this for over 2 years now, I firmly believe that those who are coming to happy hour on Fridays are actually know more about what is going on the woke left than pretty much anyone else on the internet. Now, that's a bold claim, but I really do believe they know more about what's going on than the commentators, than the journalists, than the pundits, than most people who are actually doing commentary on this. And that's because we do something on this channel that other people just don't do. We listen. We listen to all of it. We don't look at the clips. We don't look at libs of TikTok. We go back and see what the full context is. And I'll tell you what, when you watch the full context of what's going on, it's even more scary than you can possibly imagine. And that's what we uncover on Happy Hour. And of course, we do so with drinks because that makes it a little bit more palatable. And today, we've got quite a training that we're going to be watching. Today, we are watching from GLSEN, which GLSEN is one of these extreme far left progressive organizations that is working in schools, public schools, K through 12 schools. You can see it on the opening slide right there, all over the country. In all likelihood, the GLSEN, it is very likely that GLSEN is in your child's school. if your child is going to public schools. If your child is going to a public school in an urban area, it is going to be almost 100% that GLSEN is going to be partnering with that school district in some way. I've just seen them pop up over and over and over and over and over again. And I am very rarely looking into a school these days where I don't see GLSEN come up on the radar. And so today we're going to be watching, and this is kind of a funny page on GLSEN's website. It's a landing page. There's no links to this page anywhere on GLSEN's website. And the only thing on this page is a video. And that video is championing LGBTQ plus issues in special education. So, what I suspect we're going to be seeing on this video is actual grooming of special needs kids, or at a bare minimum, a group of sex educators discussing grooming special needs kids. And so if this is your first happy hour, congratulations. I suspect you picked quite a doozy for us to watch. And do you guys want to know how I found this? Do you guys want to know how I found this super secret hidden landing page on GLSEN's website? Well, let me take you back to our friend Dylan. Who remembers Dylan? Who recognizes Dylan? Now, I gotta say, I actually kind of feel bad for the amount that we're going at Dylan, because I personally think that Dylan has, I don't think that Dylan is actually like a bad person. I don't think that Dylan has like nefarious like intentions. I truly and genuinely think that Dylan believes that they are doing the right thing, which makes me feel just slightly bad, but not really. Because the reason that we recognize Dylan is the person that we streamed back in January and then again this week talking about autistic sex education. So how I found the presentation we're going to be watching today is I went to Dylan's website. I was trolling around Dylan's website, just looking for stuff, seeing what I could find. And I went to Dylan's press section on the website. And I started scrolling. I was like, what has Dylan done? Oh, wait. Dylan did an LGBTQ plus advocacy and special education video with GLSEN. And here's the full video. Oh! And that's how I found this secret hidden landing page on GLSEN's website. And don't worry, does anyone want to guess what the very first thing that I did when I found this secret landing page? Does anyone want to take a guess what the very first thing I did upon discovering this super secret unlinked video on GLSEN's website that is only linked from Dylan's press page? That's right, bot. That's right. Anytime we find a super secret video, we don't even watch the video first. We download the fucking video. You download everything, archive everything, make a copy of everything. Oh, yes. So you guys know I downloaded that shit. Yes, I did. So now, thankfully, GLSEN still has the video on their website. So we're just going to watch it on their website today. They didn't take it down or anything. But just in case they did, and just in case they do, I still have a copy of the video for posterity, just in case I want to make clips or something. Now, on that note, before we get started, I've got a couple of things to say. And we're going to do our usual order of business. But, this week was a little bit of a rough week, as you guys, ascertained. And I really want to start out this happy hour today by saying thank you. I really mean it, because I was feeling really demoralized this week. I was feeling like none of what I'm doing matters. I was looking at these numbers saying that people are way more interested in like the YouTube drama content than they are in things that I think are far more important. And it hit me very hard because, again, I really hope people understand that nothing that I've done this week has been about money. In fact, I would make significantly more money if I focused on the YouTube drama content than if I focused on the important content. And that was really like the motive wasn't to make more money, but the motive was to say, like, if no one appreciates what I'm doing, like, why am I even doing it anymore? Because I was really struggling. And so I did a couple of streams about it and I talked about it. And I'm really glad that I did because and it's not that I still don't have the views that I think autistic sex ed deserves. I think that I'm I'm still really upset and really sad that more people aren't taking this seriously or that every time I talk about it, I get told that I just want money and I'm like, "Do you idiots know how much more money I could make doing other things? Do you seriously have any idea?" No, it's never been about the money. It's been about feeling that my work is valuable. Because the thing about like, I don't like wasting my time. If I'm gonna do something and I'm gonna spend time doing it and I'm gonna put energy doing it, I want it to be for a reason and I want it to be for a purpose and I want it to be helpful to people. And so I finally talked about how I was feeling about this and I didn't get the views I wanted on autistic sex education, but what I did get was a record number of new supporters on my Substacks. Like, and I really didn't anticipate that at all. It was not, but it was just the emails that I saw coming in, it was like, "Ding, new supporter, ding, new supporter, ding, new supporter, ding, new supporter." I have now had a 57% month-over-month increase in paid supporters on my Substack, and actually, it's probably even gone up more now. I just looked at it earlier, but it's probably even gone up more. And seeing that really unexpected response, it told me that there are people out there that value what I do. Maybe not as many people as I would like. Maybe I can't help and show as many people as I like what's going on, but it really did make me feel as though people valued what I do, and I do appreciate it. And then I heard from people like Ellen, Carlin, I got off the pod and I'm school researching. All this silliness is everywhere. It is everywhere. It is everywhere. I heard from people like I mean, let me see what other good chats do I have? Let's see. I saw Judy earlier. Judy said I canceled my locals and added another Substack support, but then I added my locals back because I was miss you guys. Judy, you have been such an amazing supporter since like basically day 1. And I just hope you know how much I appreciate you and your knitting, but also just like I'm blown away and I really appreciate it. Leonard also has 2 Substack subscriptions. Ellen just joined Locals and Substack. And it's just like and I also heard, and this is probably one of the most important things. I heard from multiple people like what Amanda's saying here. I heard from multiple people saying, "Carlin, I took my kids out of school because of you." And Amanda said, "I started homeschooling my son and quit working as a teacher in 2021 thanks to your work. Thank you." I heard from so many people who said, "I took my kids out of school because of you." I really didn't know that. I really didn't know that it was having that impact. I really didn't. Lady Hawk says, "You inspired me to start looking for socialist conferences in my area. I want to infiltrate those someday." And so I just want to say thank you. I really do. It this is a thankless job. And I understand why people get burnt out. I really understand why people get burnt out. Cody says, there was a guy on Twitter that said that actually, you inspired him and his husband to homeschool his kid. Yeah. Julie says, I don't have kids. I have a niece whose parents are getting pretty woke, so conversations are impossible. I can't help this kid, but I love more than life itself, but I can try to help and you can try to help me. And I thank you. I really do. I really do. And it's not just about money, because I understand that not everyone can financially support my work. I really do. And I really get that. I wish everyone could. I mean, but like, it's rough sometimes, and I get it. And I think that if like you can't afford to financially support my work, the very best thing you can do is, again, just like watch stuff. Like, even if you're just watching a few seconds of a video, because that still registers. Watch video, like watch my stuff, like it, share it. Like, those things are just as valuable, and I really, really do appreciate it. And so I guess I just wanted to start off today by saying thank you guys, because I really needed it, and I understand how, especially now, it's like we're in between election seasons. It can be really easy to just want to check out of all of this stuff. And I get it. You want to focus, you just want to like have a real life and just like, be normal people and not be thinking about like dystopia all the time. I really do get it. But I appreciate that it seems to have reinvigorated some people to be paying attention, because I do think that this is important, and I don't think we have enough time left to really like if people aren't paying attention and they're just kind of zoning out, they're going to win. Like, they're already so far ahead, and I'm really glad that I was able to hopefully reinvigorate some people. And I think the changes that are going to come from this are going to be good. I do. I do. And yeah, that's gonna mean that I'm gonna be doing some content that is more designed around views. But I'm still gonna be doing happy hour. I'm still gonna be doing Socialism Saturday. I'm still figuring out what this looks like. And of course, we still have the Substacks, which are gonna be my home base. And guys, if you are not subscribed to my Substack, you can head over and subscribe at Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. That's the one I wanted. And I will go ahead and put the link in the chat. And this is where you are going to be able to get all of my very best Unwoke content. Now, I do have other Substacks as well, but this is kind of like the home base, the king of all Substacks, if you will. And so this is where I'm publishing like the very best of my Unwoke content. I'm trying to download everything I know to you. Last night, I published the Socialist Reading List, which is an article basically showing you the new socialism books that are coming out and the books I saw at the Socialism Conference, to include, guys, did you know that Antifa has a coloring book? Antifa literally has a coloring book. Antifa also has their own tarot cards. I'm not joking. Joshua is thrilled at this. And so I published that last night on the Substack. I've actually got Lady Hawk. Lady Hawk mentioned that she wants to infiltrate socialist conferences. I've actually got an article in progress right now that's all about, here's what you need to know if you are going to infiltrate a socialist conference, like how you show up, how you act, how you detach yourself from what's going on to just observe all that. So I am actually working on an article about that. And of course, we're doing lots of more great stuff too. If you guys want to head over to carlin.substack.com and check it out. And of course, you can also find 4 ways to support my work, to include funding my work on Substack or whatever platform works best for you, to include subscribing to the cult. The cult, which is going to need to get refreshed. There it is. The cult is a different Substack I have. And this is basically where it's my home base for the show. And this is totally for free. This is a mailing list that you can get signed up to, where prior to the show, I will send out an update saying, here's what we're doing on the show today. Here are the show notes. Here are the platform links that you can watch on YouTube, Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble. And shout out to everyone watching on Odyssey, Rockfin, and Rumble. I appreciate it, guys. And that way you'll have it all in your inbox and you'll know what I'm talking about, so you can decide if you want to come to the show today or not. But I'm really trying to do this before every show. I missed it yesterday because I was just way too busy, but I've been doing it for every other show lately. It really works out well. It's totally free. I may monetize it at some point, just if people want a way to donate. I know that many people have actually already pledged their support on this, which is really great. But it's not monetized right now. It's totally for free. It's just to help you guys to be able to, because many of you have told me YouTube is not notifying you of my content. Okay, well, I've got a backup. So go get subscribed to the cult, and you'll get an email every single day when I'm going to go live with what I'm going to be going live with. I'm also building out a video archive on the cult. I'm building out an audio podcast. I got a whole bunch of stuff I need to upload it to it in the next couple of days that I've been like kind of dragging my feet on, but that's all right. But lots going on over there. Another way you can support my work is by heading over to the Unwoke Art Store, which is unwokeart.com. And this is my merch store. We got great merch. We got the Be Different mug. We got the dragon burning down Washington, D.C., the special Tucker Carlson collection. And guys, I'm going to be extending the Unwoke art contest just 1 week. It's been a heck of a week. And so I want to give people one last chance to join the Unwoke art contest, which is on unwokeart.substack.com. I know people are like, I already got my entry in, Carlin. But I forgot it was going to be May. I forgot. And so we're going to be doing that. And then, of course, sharing my work is basically the number one thing that you can do to help me out. And I do really appreciate that, guys. All right, we got a couple super chats that have come in. Nuru2 says, so the LPNH considers you trash. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Well, some of you may have missed this little dramatic update, but so, and I'll be quick about this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire has experienced an internal coup where the chair of the party, well, now the former chair, but the chair of the party, his name is Conrad Nelson. Conrad is basically one of the best guys you could ever meet, ever. He is a stand-up dude. He is reasonable. He is measured. He is so smart. He is so considerate of everyone. And Conrad didn't like it that the official Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Twitter account was shitting on PorkFest, which is like the best pro-liberty event that happens in New Hampshire. And the LPNH account was like liking tweets that were shitting on PorkFest. And so Conrad, as the party chair that was elected almost unanimously in January, took the keys away from the Twitter account and said, you're not going to do that shit. And then the executive committee decided to remove Conrad from his role as chair so that the alt-right conservative lunatics who are currently running the Twitter could get the keys to the Twitter back. So they quite literally removed the chair, the elected party chair, from his role so that they could have their precious Twitter again. And then they proceeded to start the people running the account called Conrad the F word that rhymes with maggot that I'm not going to repeat. And they started posting publicly that, you know, they're just kicking the trash out of the party, which I'm one of the people that left. I have demanded my dues refunded. And then they blocked me on Twitter, even though I'm a dues paying member of the party. And now they're scaring away new movers, which is really great. This is going to be great for libertarian concentration, is the alt-right lunatics currently running the LPNH Twitter account are shit talking new movers and not wanting them to come here at all. So it's been an all around banner day in the land of libertarian politics. I'm kind of washing my hands of it. I want nothing to do with it. The only reason I was even staying involved is because Conrad got elected chair of the party, and that was what was keeping me involved anyway. And now that Conrad has been usurped in his position, there's just no reason for me to be involved anymore. So I have requested that my dues be refunded. I don't want any part of this bullshit. And yeah, they called me trash for it. So it is what it is. I guess so. I guess the right wing is winning over the LPNH today. But like the thing of it is, they don't do anything anyway, is the thing. They don't do anything. And so it's not really that much of a loss because they don't effing do anything. We will all survive. Let me just see. Murphy's Pool says, be right back. Looking for a tea bag. Oh, thanks, Murphy's Pool. Thanks. Appreciate it. Like the new image. Thank you. Thank you. Per usual, Murphy's Pool. Keeping it classy. PT says, since I'm not thrifting today, I will send you a little dough. Oh, thank you, PT. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate it. All right. Is that all the super chats we've got for right now? All right. All right. All right. So, there, of course, is one more order of business before we get started. Actually, no, there's a couple more orders of business. I lied. Number one, should we do bingo today? Should we do bingo? I think I've got queer bingo. Let me get queer bingo out. Gender queer bingo. All right. So we're going to do gender queer bingo in the chat today. Let me copy this bingo card. Oh, shit. There we go. Let me see. I actually have to show you gender queer bingo, don't I? There we go. We got gender queer bingo in the chat today. How you do this is you get your bingo cards. You don't win anything if you win. This is just to kind of pass the time. You hit generate card. Okay, we've got a free square in the middle, and then we're going for lines or we're going for corners. If you don't know what any of the words mean, That's okay. You don't have to. They just want to be, you got to wait for them to be mentioned. But if you want definitions for the words, let us know in the chat. We'll be able to help you out with that. If you get a bingo, shout it out. Again, you don't win anything, but this kind of keeps us involved, keeps us engaged, keeps us watching the content, and we'll give you a hearty round of applause. And maybe we'll even hit a blackout bingo. Once we get someone with a bingo, we go for blackout bingo after that. And so this is a fun little game if you guys want to play along. Thank you for the super sticker, Wyoming gal. I do appreciate it. And then the last thing I want to announce is happy belated May the 4th. Now, for people supporting my work, if you are new to the Substack, okay, especially on the Substack, if you are new to the Substack, on Sundays, I send out an email that looks like this. It is called the Unwoke Roundup. This newsletter has all of your supporter perks in it for the week, to include links to 2 supporter Zoom calls that we do on Mondays at 7 p.m., that we do on Wednesdays at noon. And it also includes a link to the supporter only Discord. Now, there are lots of reasons you want to join the supporter only Discord. Number one reason is that if you are a writer or a creative person, on Thursday evenings in the supporter Discord, there is actually a writers group. And actually, many of the people in the writers group are published authors or about to be published authors. And so they get together once a week to do writing exercises, creative exercises, writing brainstorming. Even people who are my locals that weren't writing at all or hadn't written in years have joined writers group to kind of just get involved again and do something creative. I think it's a wonderful thing. Some amazing work has been produced in writers group. And so that's on Thursdays in the supporter Discord. But then on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, we do movie night. We do movie trivia. We have discussions, and we watch the movie from start to finish and we talk about it. And this Sunday, the granddaddy of them all, we are watching Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, because Jennifer assures me that it is the greatest movie ever made, and Jennifer runs movie nights, and I have to give her what she wants. I don't actually get to pick out the movies for movie night, but no, I'm kidding. I am looking forward to it. It is a great movie. As much as I like to make fun of Star Wars people, it is a great movie. So come and join us on Sunday in the supporter Discord. Come watch Star Wars with us. You will get access to supporter Discord if you are a member of my Substack, if you are a member of my locals, if you're a member of my Patreon, and if you are a member of this here YouTube channel. Benjamin asked, which cut of the film? I'm not sure there was a clear answer on that, Benjamin. You'll have to ask Jennifer, all right? I'm not sure. And I will be sending out the link to join the supporter Discord on Sunday. And if you're on the Substack, again, you want to make sure you look for the Unwoke Roundup email, because that's going to have the supporter Discord information. And it has it way down at the bottom after all this stuff, way down at the bottom. And you get access to the supporter perks after that. And it keeps everyone in a good place, etc., etc. All right, guys. Now, our last order of business before we take the super chat from King Peter of the chat. The Libertarian Party, just like the Republicans or Democrats, except you get to be subverted by the far right and far left at the same time. Ain't it the truth, bro? Ain't it the truth? But the thing of it is, like, so now rumors are going to start. They're going to be like, Carlin left another political party. But no, I really didn't. I'm like not going to associate with right-wing lunatics and nonsense, but I'm still a libertarian. You don't actually have to be in the Libertarian Party to be a libertarian. I'm still an anarcho-capitalist. I don't give an F. And I'm still involved in the libertarian community in New Hampshire. I'm the Free State community. I have lots of friends in it. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not leaving a political party or anything. I'm just like, I am not going to associate with chaos and insanity. Yeah, it is what it is, I suppose. Well, the last thing we need to do today is pick out a beer. Who's got a beer? Is anyone drinking anything fun? Let me get my beers and I will show you what you can pick from. And we have a tradition on Happy Hour that you guys get to vote for the first beer that I drink on the stream. Hang on. Oh. Yay. All right. So here are our beers for today. No, I'm not going to drink all 4 beers. I'm just telling you what they are to educate you about the world of the craft beer. Radical Moderate, you're drinking a Bud Light. How dare you? So the first beer, I could not resist. I mean, come on. Look at that can. I want like a blueberry lemon bar now, but I don't have a blueberry lemon bar, but I do have a blueberry lemon bar beer. This is from Smutty Nose Brewing Company. This is a limited release sour, and it doesn't have any description on it. It just says blueberry lemon bar sour, and it has a delicious picture on it, and I think that it's going to be great. So that is our first option for today. The second option I have, okay, I literally just got this beer because I think it's going to be purple. Also, it has a cool can. I have a beer can collection brewing. I have a little wall over on the other side here where I'm putting I'm saving all my best beer cans, and it is a pretty can, right? But the real reason I got this beer is it is called Purple Peak. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be purple drink. I think it's going to be a purple beer, and it's from Granite Roots Brewing, and I think they're in New Hampshire. They are in New Hampshire, and this is a Berliner Weiss with black currant and plum. So purple beer. Yay! The next beer I have is I love stouts. Stouts are my favorite beer. And one of the types of stouts that I love more than any other are coconut stouts. Now, this might not seem intuitive, but coconut and stout really do go very well together. So this is from Sloop Brewing, also a New Hampshire beer, and this is a milk stout with malted oats, toasted coconut, and lactose. Yay! And then our last one for today, and then we're going to put the poll in the chat. This is another pretty can, so that always matters. This is from Barreled Souls Brewing Company in Saco, Maine, and this is called Stout Me, and this is a stout with Snickers. They made a candy bar stout. What's not to love? All right, guys, so now you're going to get a chance to vote. Do you want me to start off with the blueberry lemon bar beer? Do you want me to start off with the purple beer? Do you want me to start off with the coconut stout? Or do you want me to start off with the Snickers stout? The poll is in the chat. Let me know what you think. And while we're doing that, I do just want to take a moment to do a shout out to people watching on Odyssey, on Rockfin, on Rumble. Let me see how many people I have watching on Rumble right now. 15. So that's not so bad. Thank you guys for watching on Rumble. I do appreciate it. I will try to keep an eye on the chat in Rumble as much as I possibly can. And now I'm going to just set up the sound so we can start this here presentation. Guys, please make sure to mount that like button for me if you would be so kind. Again, we do happy hours every Friday at 5 p.m. And today we are watching a presentation about LGBTQ plus advocacy in special education. What could possibly go wrong? And it looks like purple's going to win out for today. I knew you guys would want to see that color. All right, let me just put the rest of the beers back in the cooler. And please let us know if you're drinking something fun in the chat. Hang on one sec. All right, guys, let's see if this beer is really purple. Are you ready? Are you ready? Hang on. Let's see if it's really purple. Okay, no explosion on my desk. That's a good start. And I do drink my beer in a wine glass because I'm bougie like that. Oh, I see some. Oh, it's a little red. Okay, that's okay. Now it's getting purple. All right, maybe a little reddish purple. Well, it's acceptable. It's acceptable. Cheers, guys. Happy Friday. We made it through another week. Ooh, that's good. Kay says, I don't drink, almost cost me a divorce, so I'll burn one with you all. Well, you know, to each their own. No judgment here. All right, guys, let's get started for today. And let's pray for us. Someone say a rosary. All right, here we go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to GLSEN Education webinar series. Today, we're focusing on...
All right, just so you guys know, I don't see a way to do closed captions. So GLSEN is obviously being very ableist, but I'll look around to see if we can turn on closed captions.
On LGBTQ plus education and advocacy in special education. And I'm Becca Malie. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the education manager at GLSEN. I'm very excited to be here for this conversation. Before coming to GLSEN, I worked for 5 years at an inclusion school as an elementary school teacher and also LGBTQ coordinator. And I was able to be out at that school to talk and teach to my students about LGBTQ plus identity, challenging gender stereotypes, and also to provide trainings to the faculty and information for the families. So I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation. I'm really grateful to have all of you who are here to learn with us and to be part of this introductory conversation and just to moderate this panel today. A couple of technical notes before we get started. You can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. So please do use the chat button if you're having any difficulty
I'll look into
or
that,
any
Sour
information
Kiwi. Thank
that you
you.
need. We also have gotten some information ahead of time to shape these questions, but if you do have some questions that come up either for me or for GLSEN or for the panelists, please feel free to chat that information in our Q&A, and we'll either try to get to that at the end of this panel or we'll follow up later. A little bit about GLSEN before we get started. GLSEN is a national nonprofit organization that advocates for LGBTQ visibility and supports in K-12 schools. And we do that in a number of ways. One is educational resources like this one, our free education webinar series. We also have an original research. I'll be looking at some of the research today from our National School Climate Survey in 2017 that looks specifically at LGBTQ students with disabilities. We also have student leadership. We have an incredible National Student Council that help better inform and shape our work. And we have a policy department that's based in DC. They work on grassroots state and federal legislation. And we also could not do any of this work without our incredible local chapters. They help implement our resources and supports throughout the country. And I know some of them also attend these webinars, so thank you for taking this time if you're here. And I also just wanted to highlight really quickly GLSEN's National Days of Action Solidarity Week, which happened in the beginning of this year, but also whose resources are still available and relevant to our work. No Name Calling Week, which is coming up in January, and I'll talk more about later at the end of this webinar.
Oh,
and then the Day of Silence, which—
Wait, Benjamin is bringing up information that is of critical importance. While some PBS stations are going live at 2:30 a.m. for the coronation starts at 6 a.m. for those who want to partake. Okay. It is not out of the realm of possibility that I'm going to stay up all night and stream the coronation. I'm just letting people know. I'm not fully committed to this plan. This, in fact, like the potential of me staying up all night and then just drinking a lot and then streaming the coronation starting at 5 a.m. That's like not out of the realm of possibility. And I'm seriously considering it. It starts in earnest at 5 a.m. because and that's like 11 a.m. like their time, right? Or something like that. It starts when the procession leaves, but I know way too much about coronation. All right. I know all the different parts. I've watched the other coronations like more than I should have. Maybe I'll even do a pre-stream starting around 2 a.m. and we'll watch Queen Elizabeth's coronation because it's fucking amazing. But anyway, so they start the procession leaving Buckingham Palace with the coronation coach and like all these soldiers and things, and they go around London and then they go to Westminster Abbey, and then there's the ceremony is only supposed to be an hour long, which I doubt they're only get. But I want to see the clothes, I want to see the crowns, I want to see the moment where they put the crown on Charles's head. I'm so into this stuff. I think I'm like talking myself into doing it right now, just so we're all clear. I'm literally talking. I'm like, I'm just going to stay up all night and stream the coronation. It's going to be effing great.
Comes up every April and is our largest led day of student action. All right. So I'd love to just go over our agenda briefly before we turn it over to the panelists. They'll introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are and why they're here. Then I'm going to frame some of this conversation with research on LGBTQ people and disabilities. And then we'll have our panel discussion. We'll talk about what is special education and who does it serve. Talk a little bit about parent advocacy, some tips for discussing LGBTQ plus identity with students, and the need for an intersectional approach. I'm going to turn it over. So grateful to be
Oh,
joined by
there's
these incredible panelists, and I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Okay. Hi, I am Trey Robinson. I am GLSEN's 2020 Educator of the Year, and I currently teach special education in San Jose, California for high school students. This is my 9th year teaching special ed, and I've been working in education for about 14 years. I've taught every grade except for 7th and 8th, and almost every subject except for foreign language and math. That's not me. But I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very happy to be here. My primary subject is usually dealing with students who have exceptional needs that relate to emotional needs, mental health, and behavioral disorders. And my real passion is just for parent advocacy and helping parents get to a point where they can independently manage their students' educational needs, mental health needs, emotional needs, behavioral needs.
Hang on, I missed Trendalin's super chat from earlier. Trendalin, I so apologize. I saw it come in and I was like, I'm going to do it before we get started. I really do apologize. Trendalin says, I would love to have you come to the LPCA convention in February next year as a speaker. I would love that, Trendalin. We can work that out. I really appreciate you, and I apologize for missing your super chat, and I thank you for it.
And that student can really be successful.
Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Caput. I use they, them pronouns.
Hi, Dylan.
I'm a Jewish, autistic, queer, trans, and non-binary person. I'm currently located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but my heart is with my chosen family in New York City, where I just left after 8 wonderful years of teaching elementary special ed. I mostly taught neurodiverse students, specifically students on a spectrum.
Dylan taught elementary special education for 8 years. I don't think that we knew that from when we watched Autistic Sex Education. That kind of, does that paint the content from Autistic Sex Education in a different light now? That like, yeah. Do you guys, does everyone understand why I have been hammering and harping on this? This is actually a thing that is reaching real children in the real world.
And now I'm in Pittsburgh working on my PhD in special education with a focus on creating sex ed materials for autistic folks.
Oh, isn't that nice?
So I'm so happy to be here today. I'm also a proud member of GLSEN's Educator Advisory Council.
I'm sorry, what? This just fucking keeps getting better. A member of GLSEN's Special Education Advisory Council, which means that not only did Dylan give his not only did Dylan give their autistic sex ed talk as the keynote at the National Sex Education Conference, Dylan is also advising educators as a part of GLSEN, which I remind you is in hundreds, probably thousands of school districts all over the country. Great.
And I'm so excited to join this panel. My name is Jessica Tost, she, hers. I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Texas at Austin. My research focuses on reading development and intensifying interventions for students with reading disabilities, including dyslexia. I teach courses on reading instruction and intervention, learning disabilities, and special education law. I also serve as the chair of the Board of Directors of Disability Rights Texas, which is our state's protection and advocacy agency for individuals with disabilities. I've been involved with GLSEN since 2012. I currently serve on GLSEN's National Board of Directors and as co-chair of the National Advisory Council, and I work with the GLSEN Austin chapter.
Thank you. So delighted to have these folks here, and we'll get to the panel questions after a little bit of framing research. So I wanted to start by looking at the Movement Advancements Project, research on LGBT people with disabilities. And it shows that LGBT people with Disabilities were more likely than the general population to have a disability and to face systemic challenges, finding employment, community, and more. And it's also important to note that this research, unlike GLSEN research, is focused on adults and not LGBTQ youth. Emerging research finds that LGBTQ and gender nonconforming youth are greatly overrepresented in the criminal and juvenile justice systems, as are people with disabilities and people with color. So given these high rates, it's likely that LGBT people and LGBTQ youth with disabilities comprise a large share of populations in nations' prisons, jails, and juvenile detention facilities. I also wanted to highlight the research that GLSEN from our institute has an insight on the experience of LGBTQ students with disabilities, again, focusing on middle and high school age youth. And it found that LGBTQ students with disabilities were more likely to report high rates of harassment or be bullied or harassed at school, more likely to have missed school in the past month, more likely to be disciplined in school or to drop out of school or to change schools. So it's really important that when we're tackling school-based issues like bullying, dropout, and discipline, that our supports are inclusive of LGBTQ+ students with disabilities. Additionally, LGBT people with disabilities can experience invisibility within both communities, often reporting that it's challenging to have their identities fully recognized. In spaces focused on disability, their unique experiences as LGBT people may not be recognized, and in LGBT spaces, services and facilities may not be inclusive or accessible. So that's why an intersectional approach is so important. As LGBTQ+ supportive educators, we know our work has the greatest impact when we center the most marginalized in our efforts, and yet it's all too often that disability justice is left out of our advocacy. More work needs to be done at the intersections to make sure that we're doing the best for all of our students. And I'm really delighted again for folks to join us today and to be joined by these experts to help us to learn more. So my first question is for Jess. Can you provide some context for our participants on what special education is and who it serves?
Sure. Special education is the term we use to describe the range of services and supports, as well as protections that are afforded to students with disabilities. The purpose of special education is to increase access to and opportunities for learning for all students in K-12 schools. I'll give a little very brief history of special education law to give some context here. When federal education law was first passed in 1965.
Hang on, Ellen is making a great comment in the chat, and I just want to make sure we highlight it. Ellen says, it's just extraordinary how the far left has pulled together and how much time they devote for this. It's like we could have solved world hunger or poverty or environment stuff with all that energy. That is exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why I just keep hammering on people that I know how easy it is to disconnect from this stuff. I know how easy it is to like just not want to look at it. But every single time that we take our eye off the ball, the left uses that as an opportunity to make more progress. And so this is not only a war of attrition, in that they want us to quit. They want us to look away. We've talked on Happy Hour and on Socialism Saturday about how they will bore us to death to get us to not watch and listen to what they're doing because they want to turn us away. They want us to say, this is boring. I don't like watching it. I don't like their voice. And so I don't want to watch. That's what they want. And when we are complaining about someone's voice or the amount that they say, or how hard this is to watch, that is the moment that they are using to make progress. And so while I know that this stuff is exhausting and I know that it's hard to watch, if we don't watch it and engage with it and listen to what they're doing, then we are giving them all the ammo that they need to win, guys. And so like I know like you like no, I'm not asking anyone to be crazy about this like I am, because I'm obsessed and it's a little bit of a problem and I think we can all acknowledge that, all right? But I need people to engage with this, because when you don't, they're making progress and they're winning.
The Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It took about 5 years until 1970 to consolidate programs and funding to support students with disabilities. About 2 years later, in 1972, there was a congressional investigation to understand how students with disabilities were whether or not they were being underserved across the nation. And it was estimated that of about 8 million students who would require services, 2.5 million were receiving substandard education, and 1.75 million students were not in school at all. This investigation led to the passing of Public Law 94-142, and you can see on the slide here as well that Becca has up, also called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. This was passed, and it was the predecessor to what is now the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which was passed in 1990, amended in 97, and 2004 is due in future for an amendment as well. And the purpose of this federal law is to ensure that every student with a disability receives free, appropriate public education that prepares them for future education, employment, and independent living. And so we continue to have a ways to go to ensure high quality education for all students with disabilities. But I wanted to highlight this history of special education to emphasize the hard-fought battle there has been to address systemic discrimination against students because of disability.
GLSEN.
And advocacy
it's in the corner
from
of the
folks
slide.
with disabilities and parents of.
So GLSEN is how they spell GLSEN, and it stands for something. I think like gay. I think it's Gay Lesbian Sex Education Network. I think.
Children with disabilities has really been the key driver behind the protections that exist today.
Thank you so much, and for providing that context. It's interesting it hasn't been updated since 2004, but it's really helpful to see all of the changes that have happened, and really important to have a context for the historical barriers and to root this conversation in systemic discrimination and an understanding that students with multiple marginalized identities, particularly Indigenous, Black, and Latinx LGBTQ+ youth and their families, can be the furthest from opportunity and at a disadvantage for working within these systems. That leads me to my next question, which is for Trey. What are some of the disparities you've witnessed in your work in the enforcement of special education policies for students of color, and how does parent advocacy affect this?
So for me, a lot of the disparities that I see really do come back to a lack of parent advocacy or an ineffectiveness in parent advocacy. So what tends to happen is you have student interventions that are set out for different kids. You have student interventions that are required. You have a process that every school district follows. Unfortunately, in order to know the ins and outs of that process, you either need to have worked in the school district, you need to be someone who deals with that level of kind of like bureaucratic processing. And you also have to be able to articulate the needs of your student in a way that most people can't. And in order to know all of that and the verbiage and the ed code and the IDEA requirements, typically when you sit in those meetings and you see parents who are able to do that, they are already highly educated. They are already able to access that information on their own, and they're highly likely to be white. And that is probably one of the biggest disparities that comes about when we talk parent advocacy.
Hang on, I just want to respond to one of the chats. Welcome, just getting here. Is this another spy stream? So this is slightly different than spy stream. Spy stream is when we are infiltrating like a live training that's happening in real time. That's what Autistic Sex Ed was. We actually had spies in there, and we were getting their video, and that was, just so people know, and I don't think, like, that was actually a private closed training. So I don't like, that was not going to be a public thing that they were like putting on YouTube. And we got the video and we put it out there. This is a little bit different in that this is a video that they have put out there for like public consumption, and we're watching it after the fact. And I'm not exactly sure when this was filmed because like they don't have a date on it or anything. But it's kind of similar in that we're watching the same types of things. The difference is that this is not live, this is a recording. And we didn't have to infiltrate because it was public on the internet. But we do this every Friday at 5 p.m. This is our regular happy hour stream. Yep, and Spy Stream can happen at any time. Spy Stream has no schedule. When we're doing Spy Stream, we're on their schedule. So it's a little bit tricky sometimes.
You have a lot of parents who are happy to go in and speak on their child's behalf, which is fantastic. I always encourage it. But then you hit the roadblock of, if you are not articulating the need of your student exactly the way that the district is expecting you to say it, if you don't know the 3 key words to include in your email when you send it, you get nowhere, because you're not asking the right question, and therefore you're not going to get the right answer. And that difference comes into play when we're talking about the efficacy of a student's IEP. If you need for your student to have a very specific set of interactive requirements when you're talking about behavior or discipline, the student has a behavior intervention plan. It says when X behavior starts, you respond in Y way. If you don't understand the ins and outs of that plan and you can't articulate it, you cannot hold your school accountable to enforcing it. And then you have disciplinary actions that take place against the student that shouldn't be taking place. But you also have parents who believe everything that your school and your IEP team is doing is intentionally for the best of your student. And most of the time that's true. But there is always that slight disparity when we look at the numbers on suspensions and expulsions for students of color and minority students, where we're seeing an exaggeratedly high rate of suspensions. But then we also have the second piece of parent advocacy need, which is when you're dealing with a school with a high rate of minority students or a high rate of students of color, they are reticent to identify those students as having special needs, because that runs their rate of how many students have we over-identified as needing to be in these services and needing to be in these classes up. Your student probably still needs that help. It is not supposed to count against them that they are a student of color. You will have to advocate, you will have to go to bat, you will have to argue, no, I understand you're worried about the fact that you're overrepresenting this person or this this ethnicity in your student population, but my child still needs help, and this is how I know. And that becomes a problem.
Thank you. And I think the idea about overrepresentation, there's a lot of research and information and articles that we could share that kind of look at this idea of the overrepresentation of students of color in special education. And I think your point of making sure that that statistic isn't keeping students who need services from receiving them is really important to hold. And also the idea around access, it is a privileged thing to have the time, to have the language, have English at that way to be able to advocate, and it really should not be a factor in whether or not students are being served in our schools. So thank you for providing that. And we will have some parent resources available at the end of this webinar as well. And that's sort of thinking about advocacy and thinking about calling folks in. We know that the folks on this panel are here because you're called into learning more, but you might want some support in bringing in colleagues or administrators or families to this work. So I'm wondering for Dylan, if you could speak to why do you think it's important to talk about gender and sexuality and including LGBTQ identity in special education?
So the simple answer to that is that the overlap between the two communities is huge. There is not an insignificant number of the LGBTQ community who identifies as someone with a disability and vice versa. So I would argue that anyone who is serving either community, whether
I want to show you guys something. I want to show you guys the nonsense that I have to deal with every single effing day and why things get a little frustrating sometimes. So can I show you guys a comment that just came in on the Cult Substack on this episode that we're watching right now? And this is from someone, this is not from a leftist. This is someone who claims to be from the anti-woke space. And this person has left me a comment saying, May your followers decrease. May your fantastic grumbling cease. Don't you know by now, less and less don't want to follow you. You saw how your empire caved while you were flitting around all hippery-lippery like a maniacal butterfly wishing to be pinned as you're already dim and twisted vision dimmed, and there are very little left for you to garnish and coat it with your poison spittle varnish. I know who this is. This is someone that comes from the anti-woke space, and every single time, and they actually make new Substack accounts all the time to like be able to leave these shitty comments on my Substack. But I wanted to be able to show you this to you guys before I block this asshole. Yes, this person actually wrote a poem, and I know who this is. This is an unhinged lunatic that trolls around the anti-woke space that is actually embraced by some of the psychotic people in the space. So I just wanted to show you guys that and give you a little taste into that nonsense. So now I'm going to block this person and we're going to remove all of their comments. Yay. And now we're going to get back to it. Thank you guys for allowing me that point of personal privilege. Please mount the like button if you are appreciating the content that I'm giving you today.
You're not a special educator and you're just serving LGBTQ youth, or
Wasn't
you
a
are
very
a
good
special
poem.
educator
It's true.
who doesn't know if you have ALP students, I promise that you are serving LGBTQ youth. So the real reason that it's important to build conversation around the intersection is because anyone who's working with either community is really working with both communities. Specifically, I can talk a little bit more about the fact that the number of people who identify as LGBTQ and experience some sort of neurodiverse identity, whether that's ADHD or even more specifically autism, that identities kind of coexist at huge numbers. There is not enough research on this, and so stay tuned. But there is research being done right now around the fact that a huge number of trans and gender nonconforming folks are folks on the spectrum. And there are a huge number of folks on the spectrum who have questions about their gender identities. So the significant
I wonder
overlap is
how that
definitely
happened.
one reason to have those conversations. Another is just kind of creating empathy, I think, is a big part of the conversation. And the fact that even folks with disabilities who are cisgender, heterosexual folks can connect to what it's like to experience, discrimination and difference. So creating connection between people with disabilities and people who have other types of differences, LGBTQ folks, people of color, is definitely really important. But I could nerd out about this all day. Just that the intersection is huge, and that if you are serving one community, you're serving both communities, and so developing knowledge around how to do that is really important.
Thank you. And
So
it really reminds me of a lot of the advocacy.
I want you to think about what's so insidious about what Dylan just did. And the Philosophist says, I hate their logic so much. Well, I agree with you, Philosophist, but let's think about what Dylan just did for a second. There is conceivably the target audience for this webinar that GLSEN is hosting is special education teachers. So one of the things we do on Happy Hour quite a bit is we watch teacher training, because whatever your teachers get trained on will trickle into the classroom and impact your kids in that classroom. Teacher professional development training is one of the most insidious ways that they get these ideas into the schools. And so that's where we spend a lot of time learning what they're teaching the teachers, because that's going to impact what the teachers are teaching the students, right? That makes sense. The target audience for this webinar is special education teachers. And Dylan, who is being propped up as an expert in neurodivergence and autism by GLSEN, by Columbia University, which is where Dylan graduated from, by the University of Pittsburgh, which is where Dylan is getting their PhD, and GLSEN is a major organization working in schools all over the country. What Dylan has just told these special education teachers is that the majority of neurodivergent students that you have are going to be queer or gender nonconforming. And if you are a responsible a responsible special needs educator, you need to teach them about queer and non-binary issues. Now, that might seem simple, right? But now the seed has been planted in these special educators who are watching this webinar. If I'm going to be good at my job, I have to teach the autistic and the neurodivergent kids that I'm educating, I have to teach them about gender. That's how this stuff gets into the schools. It's not coming off of library books. Library books are like a symptom of a much larger problem. It is so much more insidious than that. It's quiet. The way they're going into the schools, it's a quiet infiltration. It's not something they're shouting. They're doing it through training the teachers, putting these ideas in the teachers' heads. The teachers have already been primed for this because of the colleges of education and the ongoing teacher education training that they have to do. And when the ideas are in the teachers' heads, they truly believe that in order to be good and effective teachers, this is what they need to do. This is not something that's talked about at school board meetings. This is not something that's talked about on conservative media, but this is how they're infiltrating the schools. Does that make sense to everyone? When you're trying to understand how the woke left is doing what it's doing, it's the very first thing that you have to get over is we see, like, on conservative media, we see all these images of like woke leftists and SJWs, and they're all shouting and looking crazy, and they have crazy hair and all this stuff. And it's like, what that leads people to believe is that how they're infiltrating the schools is loud and boisterous and obvious, and it's going to be like right in your face, but it's not. This is why I keep trying to tell people, drag queens, distraction. It is a giant distraction. They want you looking at the big, loud, boisterous drag queen. They want you looking at that, okay? But that is a symptom of the problem. It's not where the problem is started. And while everyone is focusing on the drag queens, what are they doing? They're training special educators to say, the vast majority of neurodivergent and special needs children that you educate are going to be queer or gender nonconforming. And so it's your responsibility as a special educator to make sure you understand that these are issues that you need to talk about with your students. Stop looking at the loudest thing. Every single time you're looking at the loudest thing, you're being distracted. Think of it like it's the magician's assistant, guys. It's the hot, thin, blonde woman in the really tight get-up on the magician stage, and she's twirling around and slinking around and doing all this stuff over on one side of the stage, while the magician is doing the trick quietly on this other side of the stage, and you're so distracted by the slinky outfits and the boobs that you don't see how the trick is done. This is how the trick is done.
And points that we make for LGBTQ inclusive curriculum in general, thinking about, providing mirrors to students and also windows as well, and that is beneficial for all students. So I appreciate you making that more explicit for this context. And that's a little bit about kind of the who and the what. And so now we'll focus on how. I know a lot of folks have come because they want to begin this in their classrooms, and I'd love to hear some tips or practices that you can share for how to address and discuss LGBTQ plus identity with students.
Aha.
I've got you up.
Push unmute.
Okay.
For myself, when I give tips about discussing your identity with students, it really talks about, my focus is always on the culture of your classroom.
They're talking about discussing their gender identity with special needs students. Can we think about how crazy that is? Why are they discussing their gender identity with special needs students?
If you don't have the kind of a classroom environment where you can have a serious conversation with your students about a topic that maybe they are not quite mature enough for, but it is one that they're approaching anyways, then you probably should shy away from having that intense of a conversation at that time, and work on establishing the culture in your classroom. Because if your students don't believe that they're going to be safe sharing that identity information, they're not going to. And you also have to consider the fact that you need to know your school environment. You need to know your student population. You need to know something about the students' cultures in your classroom. And that's really not a fuller
Hang on.
comprehensive.
I want to say something based on something. So Mickey, I'm going to pronounce it Mikey, Mickey. I don't mean to pick on you. And I'm not, you've given me an opportunity to teach something. So this is not about you personally. Saying leave the kids alone is not going to be an effective strategy at defeating this. And I'm saying this because I quite literally see this as the clapback on like Twitter, like all the time. Why don't you just leave the kids alone? Why don't you just leave the kids alone? Okay, I understand. Yeah, okay, you're right. Okay, fine. But this is not going to be an effective strategy at defeating this, because the woke left is never going to leave the kids alone. The schools, the kids, this is how they establish their stranglehold and create an undefeatable wall that we can't get past. And so saying, leave the kids alone, it's not going to convince anyone that isn't already on your side. We have got to start coming up with better arguments. We have got to start breaking this down for people more strategically. And don't ever expect that they're going to give up on this. The minute you get them in one place, they're going to get you in like 5 other places. We need to be smart. The kids are the key. That's right. So what I heard from people around like the abortion stuff is like essentially like, why don't we just let them abort all their kids? Well, because that doesn't really matter, because they're coming for your kids and they're getting your kids. They're getting them through the public schools. The kids are the key to everything. Josh says create alternative curriculum. That's not going to work. That will not work at all. Because who's going to teach the alternative curriculum? 90% of the teaching profession is corrupted and with people who adhere to this ideology. So who's going to teach it? I mean, develop it if you want. They already have. There is already alternative curriculum, but they aren't going to teach it. Sergeant Rosie, thank you for the super chat. I do really appreciate it. What a cool picture you have in your profile. All right, let's keep going.
List for the things that you would want to consider before you start doing that work and having that conversation. These are going to be teachable moments for everybody, and making mistakes in these teachable moments is definitely okay, but you have to be able to say, I made a mistake, and have your students look at you and say, wow, I respect that you're telling us that you made a mistake and you're going to try and fix that. When you don't have that growth mindset and that growth environment.
Hang on. Kelly is asking a very important question. I signed up for Substack and actively Unwoke. Is that the right one? Yes. You're good, Kelly. And I do appreciate the support. Thank you so much.
Between you and your class, you go wading into a topic like this that's really close to people's hearts because it's their identities, it's who they are. You have to understand that that's going to cause stress and trauma for students. The idea of having these conversations is stressful because for some people, they don't know what will happen once they say what they're going to say.
Oh, wait,
hang on.
You guys are making such great points in the chat. I hate to keep interrupting the presentation because I know we're trying to concentrate on utter insanity, but you guys are making such great points in the chat that I have to. ZTK says, their argument is the kids don't belong to the parents, they belong to the state. They sneak in ownership of the children. Good parents take responsibility for the growth and well-being of their kids. This is quite literally the argument that they're making. They want to, so the people pushing this philosophy want to abolish all private property, right? And we're not just talking about your houses. We're not just talking about your cars. We're not just talking about your businesses. We're not just talking about that. They quite literally consider children to be private property. And so when we're talking about parental rights, one of the arguments that the left is making is that children are not the property of their parents. that children are fully formed little adults that should be able to own themselves and own their bodies. And why are these parents making decisions on behalf of the children? Is it really healthy for parents to make decisions on behalf of the children? I'm not making that up. That was in an article that I believe was in, I think, the New York Times. It might be New York Magazine. I wrote about it in my Substack not too long ago, so I actually did a whole summary of it, and I did a stream on it as well. And so that is quite literally the argument that they're making. And that article, by the way, was written by someone who's, and I said this person was a socialist before I even finished the article because of the argument being made. But towards the end of the article, they actually admitted they were a socialist. And so they want to abolish the idea that kids are the property of their parents, and that makes them the property of the community. That's one of the things they're going to do to go after your parental rights. Naruto, James Lindsay just tweeted a Karl Marx birthday post with a picture of him peeing on Karl Marx's grave. Oh, that's spicy, James Lindsay. Always making trouble, isn't he? And then I got a super chat from Jen. Hang on, Jen. Thank you so much. True, also because parents are considered a dependent and dependents you can claim, or children are considered a dependent and dependents you can claim taxes on. The left is much less worried about that, Jen, to be really honest. Ultimately, what the left wants to do is abolish the biological family. They want all children to be born via surrogacy. They want all children to be assigned to their family of choice, if you will, by God knows who. I'm not making any of that up. We've already documented that on this channel many times. Look up the Abolish the Family content. And so that's really what they're doing. I don't think they really care about taxes because they think that the state should own everything. So like they don't care about that. But fair point. Yep, that's right, Beth. Scientology also considers children to be but little adults. So isn't it funny that the woke left and the socialists consider children to be little adults, and Scientology also considers children to be little adults?
Deal with whether it's your sexual identity, your gender identity, your orientation, your race, whether or not you have a disability. The questions that you ask and how you ask a student to share will have an effect on how they feel about that experience. Personally, I've always been almost the only African-American student in the room, or the only African-American staff member. So whenever we have a conversation about race, I'm the first person that gets looked at. That becomes uncomfortable. I don't mind sharing, but that becomes uncomfortable. So before you can really get to a point where you're doing this work with those students, you want to make sure that you have set up a set of behaviors and a set of standards for how those interactions are going to go. You have to have had an academic conversation, academic discussion, rules course with them. You need to have a we disagree with ideas and not people conversation. We respectfully disagree. We don't throw out the word stupid for any reason. We don't throw out dumb. None of those things are necessary or acceptable. You have to have zero tolerance behaviors, and they have to be listed, and you have to stick to them. And it has to be the first time it happens.
You know, Ellen's asking a question in the chat. I know Carlin has mentioned it, but I'm thoroughly interested in what they propose for their Marxist utopia. Ellen, this is something that actually, it's funny that you say this because a lot of people have been asking me about this lately, and I'm working up some thoughts on it. I do plan on writing a piece for the Substack, but I absolutely have some thoughts on it, and it's not good. It roughly, I think what they think is going to happen is the world is going to look like Brave New World, where everyone belongs to everyone else sort of thing, but everyone's living these really nice lives and you have everything you need and you don't really even need to have a job because the state's going to provide you with everything, and the state takes care of the kids, and they raise the kids. It's like a more of a community activity. The state provides all your food, your housing, all this, everyone works for the glory of the state sort of thing. I think that they think it's going to be like Brave New World type utopia, which they think is a good thing, but really isn't, because it stamps out everything that makes us human, essentially. Lots of sex, of course, lots of sex. That's definitely going to be part of it. But what I think is actually going to happen is like it's going to be more like 1984 in incredibly literal ways. So they think it's going to be a Marxist paradise, and it's actually going to turn into a Marxist nightmare. Isn't that going to be fun for all of us if we don't actually start, curtailing this? Elena says, and thank you for the super chat, Elena. My son is autistic. I live in the UK. Happy almost coronation, Elena. Are you excited, or are you an anti-monarchist? Where are you standing on this? Are you going to watch tomorrow? I'm thinking about streaming it tomorrow morning. I'm going to stay up all night. It's coronation day, baby. I live in the UK, and my advice is to subvert it by non-cooperation. Do not accept any psychological support groups from your school. They are struggle and queer. Well, Elena, this is probably one of the most important things that's going to be said on this today. If you have kids in school, do not put them in any sort of support groups, psychological groups. Opt them out of all social emotional learning surveys. Don't allow them to answer surveys. Do not let them go to that school psychologist. Keep like after school clubs. You better make sure you know what after school clubs your kids are going to. Like, I swear, you gotta, and what you need to do is really develop a relationship with your kids where they're telling you this stuff. But this is how the schools are doing a lot of this stuff. It's so subversive. They're doing it in these after school groups that they think are just like support groups or like clubs or things like that. You have got to get, if you cannot pull your kids out of public school right now, you have got to get them away from those clubs, the after school activities, unless you are damn sure that it's not nefarious. And I know that's hard because your kids are going to want to participate in them, but trust me on that one. It is if they are like, especially the gender and sexuality alliances, they also sometimes call them rainbow clubs. Like, you have got to get your kids away from there. Sergeant Rosie, thank you for the super chat. It's interesting and disturbing how the far left have separated sex from procreation. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They do not see sex as about procreation at all. Not in any way. That's actually a really good observation, Sergeant Rosie. I'm gonna think on that, because I hadn't actually thought about that before, but I'm going to now. I appreciate it.
And then it's got to be a very swift remove the incident. It has to have a consequence. You have to debrief both your students and your class and the student that was misbehaving, because it may be that they were just uncomfortable and they didn't know what else to do and they misbehaved to get out of the room. But you also,
and I appreciate that reintroduction is a part of that process, right? So that it's really building that like culture and community in your classroom where you can have these conversations.
Correct.
And students know what's expected of them when you enter them.
Correct.
And then I had just to end that I really appreciate that. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just excited about that. Did you want to add any more?
The only other thing I would add is be really careful with the absolutes that you give. If you're going to make an absolute statement, you need to understand that a lot of the mentalities and the words that are going to come out of your students' mouths are coming from their homes, their families, their cultures, and their parents. And when you go out and you say that's wrong, that's the wrong belief to have, you're also telling them their parents are wrong, their families are wrong. So you need to be sensitive to that. One of the hardest things I've ever done is learning how to respect a student in my class who was deeply homophobic and transphobic, but had the right to be, as long as he was respectful and he behaved in the appropriate manner. He didn't have to like everything. You're not going to get every student to agree, but you also have to be able to be respectful when they don't agree and they step across the line. If you can't handle that, you're going to struggle at getting your students to get there. But I think that everybody can get there.
Thank you. And I think the frame for that is something that I'm sure folks are familiar with around LGBTQ advocacy in schools, that we're there to create a culture of respect, to talk about the diversity that exists in the world, to provide
Wait. Breaking news. Hang on. Kayleigh McEnany is taking over for Tucker Carlson's slot next week. Oh, Fox News. Fox News is trying so hard to win their audience back. They're like, we're gonna give you your little princess that you all want, and we'll see if you we're gonna give you boobs and legs. And she's really smart. She is actually really smart. That's legit. Like, Kayleigh McEnany is like the real effing deal. But like, that'll be interesting. What are like, like the men are gonna be like, maybe I'm not so committed to boycotting Fox News after all is what's about to happen. She was Trump's last press secretary, blonde woman, and you know what? She was an absolute genius press secretary. I don't mean to say that she's all looks, because I really do mean it. Kayleigh McEnany is smart. Really smart, and she used to own the press like all the time. She was always like 3 steps ahead of them. It was hilarious to watch her do a press briefing. So I think that she's probably going to do a great job, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do just want to say thank you to Kenneth over on Rockfin for the tip. I do really appreciate it, Kenneth, and thank you for watching me over on Rockfin. And I do also want to again do a special shout out to the, I guess, 25 people now, yay, that are watching on Rumble, including, of course, American Legend and Sith. Thank you guys for that. I do appreciate you hanging out and spending some time with us.
Was saying, some models for connection and how that looks in different people, and how that can provide windows and also mirrors to the folks you might have in your classrooms, but that we're not there about beliefs necessarily, that it's really about actions and learning about diversity in the world, and the importance of setting up, I think, the classroom environment and setting your students up and your school up for success to have these conversations is really valuable. Thank you. Dylan, can you talk a little bit more about, once you've set up this classroom, looking at how you bring LGBTQ identities into your school?
Of course I can. So a lot of what I hear, and I think all of us hear about why we can't talk about these things, is because somebody doesn't know how to do it and doesn't have the strategies to do it. So here are some strategies. One of the most important things, I think, especially when working with neurodiverse students, but really when you're working with, I think, any young people or people with disabilities, is to make your conversations explicit and concrete. I know that we as adults who have these conversations throw around a lot of jargon about gender and sexuality. And I know that those of us who exist in queer culture do it even more so. And this is not super accessible for people with disabilities, for many young folks without disabilities, for many neurodiverse people. So really being explicit and concrete with these concepts. I think use visual supports. If you're talking about people who have different sexualities, show pictures of people who are, dating people who are of people who are in same-sex relationships. If you are talking about different gender identities and gender expressions, show not just one picture of one trans person, but many pictures of a huge variety of the gender identities and expressions that exists. I also think that attaching visuals to, if you're talking about queer things or queer people or queer places, I think really helps people with disabilities.
What are queer things and queer people and queer places? Like a gay, like, are we teaching neurodivergent kids about gay clubs? Like, is that what we mean by a queer place? What is a queer place? I'm being deadly serious. I mean, queer people, I understand that. Queer things? What queer things?
understand and helps make those concepts concrete. Another one that is really big, I think, is it's really hard for neurodiverse people to connect to concepts that just seem like they're not relevant to them.
I would say that's fair to
And
say,
so
Gator.
in making things relevant to
I would.
these students, I really like to use examples of people, places, or things that they might be familiar with. So people who have like come out in their lifetime and are on TV in shows.
Oh, Elena is mounting the flag tomorrow. Mounting the flag tomorrow. The UK flag. The Union Jack. That's what it's called. I was like searching for the name. Mounting the Union. It's going to be great. And again, guys, just in case you joined, I am strongly considering, and I feel like I've talked myself into it now. I wasn't going to do it. Like earlier today, I'm like, streaming the coronation is a horrible idea because you're going to need to stay up all night and you're going to be exhausted and you're going to be miserable. But I'm working my way into staying. I might even start special early coronation stream around 2 a.m. We might do a retrospective. Maybe we'll go back and watch Queen Elizabeth's coronation. If you have never watched it, it is amazing. We can go back and watch King George and the Queen Mother Elizabeth's coronation because the coronation tomorrow is going to have both Charles and Camilla. So it's not going to be like Queen Elizabeth's coronation. It's going to be like her father's coronation, which is also available on YouTube, which I've also watched. We could do a whole late night through early morning coronation marathon leading up to the actual coronation. First time in 70 years, guys. 70 effing years. You might not approve of monarchists. Okay, fine. But the coronation is pageantry and old world like ritual and beauty and elegance and crowns and gold carriages and pomp and circumstance and beautiful music, and it's great. And I'm talking myself into staying up all night to stream it, which means I could conceivably be drunk the entire effing time and just like it might really be next level, okay? But it'll be great. Beth says, it's my wedding anniversary. You should be honored I'm spending my evening with you, Carlin. I am honored, Beth. Happy anniversary. How many years have you been married? Do you have any tips for all of us on how to survive marriage? I feel like I'm almost 12 years in, and so I'm doing pretty well right now. But like, let us know if you have any tips in the chat. That'd be pretty great. Anyway, let's keep going. No, Meghan Markle is not attending. Nope, she stayed home. But Harry is attending. And I don't want to see Harry. I want Harry to be in the back effing row behind a candle or a pillar or something. Bot, I would never be high on the internet. I don't know what you're talking about, Bot. That would never happen. Anyway, let's keep going.
That they're actually watching. People who, like when I was in New York, most of the kids like had walked by Stonewall. So it was totally fine to show pictures of Stonewall and be like, this is a place that's in your city. Really making it relevant to them in ways like things that they might see in their communities, types of people they might see in their communities. I think that it's really awesome to teach queer history, but that's just not accessible to a lot of kids who are like, well, why do we care about this? So really grounding it in like, these are people who are on TV.
Okay, I promise this is the last thing I'm going to say about the coronation. I know I'm getting a little excited, but like we're professionals and we're going to watch this presentation. But I want to say this. There is some speculation that Meghan Markle, in order to take the attention away from Charles, is going to make some sort of big announcement or to do this weekend. So be on Meghan Markle lookout. Yeah, fucking HG Tudor is fucking obsessed with Meghan Markle. But like one of the things that he's been saying, and I've heard other people saying this too, and I really think that Meghan Markle's sister listens to HG Tudor because she basically repeated his words almost verbatim, which is, you got to watch out for it. Meghan Markle's going to try to do something to take all the attention away from Charles and the coronation, as like, it's going to be to assert control in the situation. So if she makes some announcement or there's some other news story about her, that's what that is. That's her narcissism. Isn't this fun? Oh gosh. 40 years? Beth, you've been married for 40 years? That's crazy. Congratulations, Beth. And she says, keep your sense of humor. You need it. That's good advice, generally speaking, isn't it? Thank you, Beth. Jen says, are these teachers changing the definition of queer for these young kids back to the meaning of the word uncanny or bizarre? Then what do we know? Then to what we know as adults queer meaning about sex? So generally speaking, this is a great question. Generally speaking, my understanding of what they mean when they say queer is more like different or not conforming to stereotypes or outside of like heteronormativity. So heteronormativity basically says that like straight people are the norm. And so anything outside of heteronormativity is going to be queer. Although they've also introduced homonormativity, which is gay people who act like straight people. And so they're considered to be like not queer or like lesser than. Anyway, so they use queer in a more generalized sense to be anything that doesn't conform to like gender or relationship stereotypes. So, for instance, the biological family. The biological family is going to be considered heteronormative. Okay. And so anything outside the biological family or like a polyamorous relationship or like a throuple or something like that, that's going to be considered queer. Is my best understanding. But if you have different understandings, let me know in the chat what you think.
In your shows, these are people who these are places in your city specifically. These are, you know, things that you might see in your communities. Really helps ground it in the reality of these kids who have a hard time kind of acknowledging things that exist outside of their reality.
Thank you. Yeah, it reminds me when I was teaching, we did a gender stereotypes unit so that young people were already looking and thinking about their own gender and how to break stereotypes or if they fit them and how that felt to them. And we did everyone in the school had to do a project on like a service learning project, and we did a volunteer. Actually, they wrote holiday cards to Ali Forney students, so LGBTQ homeless youth. And in order to do that, we talked about what LGBTQ meant, and we made actually a PowerPoint of just the different terms and within LGBTQ. And with permission, I was able to get folks in our school community of adults in the school and also families who identified with different identities within LGBTQ and shared them with the students. And it was really they were able to kind of see these identities and see folks that they knew. And I was also out, so I was able to be a part of that conversation. I think what you're saying about using visuals and about making things concrete, and now there wasn't as many shows and things that my students were able to see, but now there are many more. And I think being able to relate it to young people can be such a powerful way to make this more concrete. And then I'm wondering about this, again, is kind of an introduction. We're trying to begin these conversations, and there's so much more learning, so much more we can all do. And so I'm wondering for you all, what resources or organizations you can point us to that you recommend.
You made it, Armani. Congratulations. I agree. The older one is much better.
Okay, I'll answer this question. So my go-to 100% of the time, if you're looking for resources on disability anything, is to actually talk to disabled folks.
Oh. That's right, because Dylan doesn't like studies and research. We learned this in autistic sex education. Dylan doesn't like reading academic studies about autism because they say that that they're not written by autistic people, and so Dylan refuses to read them. And so Dylan thinks that the only way that you can get true and accurate information is to just ask people directly, which, you know, isn't necessarily wrong. You got to give them credit for that, I suppose, but it's a little weird.
I really struggle both personally and professionally having conversations with neurotypical people who study disability from a theoretical perspective.
I can't imagine
disability.
You can go to the coronation and you don't fucking go to the coronation.
You know, the disability community says nothing about us without us, and we pretty consistently have conversations without people with disabilities. So in looking to stop doing that, Becca put together a great list of some really awesome people you should look up on social media who are people with disabilities, like real life professional working adults with disabilities, which I think definitely, you know, a lot of those people do a lot of labor to educate the world on what it means to be a person with a disability. So I definitely recommend following people with disabilities and actually asking people with disabilities about their experiences, and not just trusting all of the neurotypical people who talk about disability from a theoretical perspective, because it's very different than the lived experience of having a disability. So I think if you have curiosities about how to support disabled folks, definitely ask disabled folks what they need. And since it's very tough to have those conversations with kids sometimes, I recommend reaching out to disabled adults. We've all been.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Sergeant Rosie. Sergeant Rosie says, my ADHD is making this conversation hard to follow. Rosie, I totally get it. I do. And that's part of why we try to make happy hour fun. I try to switch up the conversation. That's why I try to talk to the chat, because again, and we've actually talked about this in the community before, they want to bore us into turning our heads off. And if people have suggestions about how I can make this a more fun and engaging experience, please let me know. I really am open to it. But like, they want us to turn our heads off. They want us to do that. That's why I have my knitting, because like that's something that can help me alleviate like the boredom. That's why we have beer. That's why we have bingo. That's why we're keeping a rousing conversation in the chat going. And I know that none of this makes it easier, but like, it does actually get easier after a while. It's like a training program, right? Like, we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes so far. That's pretty good, right? That's like when you just start meditating, you can't meditate for a full hour when you just start meditating, but maybe you can do 5 minutes, and then maybe you can do 10, and then maybe you can do like 20, right? You kind of work your way up, you build up your tolerance. It's exactly the same way as this. In that, and Tim, I'll get you a bingo card in a second. It's exactly the same thing with this, because like I joke that like we train for this. Like we train to sit through the boring shit. This is how, when I went to the socialism conference, this is how I was able to sit through it all day and kind of keep my sanity, because I've been doing this for years now, just sitting through their content even when I'm bored. Again, may I suggest knitting? All right. But I understand your pain, and if you can't hang in anymore, you've already done your service today. So you know, we'll be here next week if you want to drop by. All right, guys. Did I put the bingo card in the chat? I did. I think I put the bingo. Yes, I did. I just put the bingo card in the chat for anyone who's new. Let's keep going. Where's my window? There it is.
Disabled for many years and advocate for ourselves. So definitely give those hashtags or people a follow online, and do some research on other disabled folks to follow or books to read by disabled people.
Thank you, Dylan. And Dylan means by putting this together, I took things that Dylan sent me and put on this slide. So absolutely, please. Thank you so much for sharing these. And I encourage y'all to take a shot of this. And we'll also be sharing it out in some of the emails for you to look up later. But I think just doing something I've been doing on my own is an audit of the folks that I follow, and just considering what identities folks have and how my own feed is representative of the information I'm trying to learn and the folks I'm trying to be in solidarity with. So I think this can
solidarity
be a really great start. So I appreciate.
If someone says solidarity, they are probably a socialist. I need to make a list of words. This is something I need to do for the Substack. I need to make a list of words that if you hear a person say this word, they are probably a socialist, because they're minimally parroting socialist language that they use in a lot of socialist conversations. But solidarity, comrade, yes, they do actually use that word, liberation, abolition, etc., etc. I follow everyone. I have so many Twitter accounts and so many secret lists. It would blow your mind.
When you're sharing with folks that we really want viewpoints. And Jess, did you want to talk a little bit about the Disability Rights Texas? Manual?
Sure. Well, so I would recommend looking for resources and support through NDRN, which is the National Disability Rights Network. And every state has a protection and advocacy agency connected to this national network. So within your own state, I really encourage you to find your P&A, to go to their website, to see what kind of resources they have available. A lot of P&As do ongoing webinars or policy briefs or legal briefs, so you can be updated on what's going on in the state. P&As support special education as well. So it's definitely a place you can go for resources, support, advocacy. On the slide, in Texas, Disability Rights Texas has a really great IDEA parent manual that walks you through, going back to what Trey was saying before about parents being advocates and having to know the ins and outs of a very complex system. It's a great manual that walks through how to maneuver this system, and it's translated in several languages. I will say that there is some Texas-specific guidelines in there, but a lot of other P&As in other states have similar documents that you can access.
Thank you. And while I have you, I know that the last conversation was on how to talk about LGBTQ identity and working with students, but I'm wondering if you had anything you wanted to share about that conversation.
I think Trey and Dylan answered it really well. I think the only thing I was going to add was, as someone who is a teacher educator, I think emphasizing the important role of explicit instruction, as Trey and Dylan both mentioned, is so critical. And so when introducing any new topic, students really need to be taught foundational knowledge and concepts, and all students, but especially students with disabilities. And this instruction serves as an entry point for them to engage in deeper inquiry and critical thinking. So if we don't provide that sort of foundation, that explicit instruction, how to use terms, how to understand these concepts, what they mean, getting through jargon, we're really denying students the opportunity to do that deep inquiry and deep thinking.
Thank you. It's an important point.
So I just want to make a quick announcement for anyone in the LPNH who might be watching this right now. You guys might think you know who sent me the documents that I have, but I promise you, you do not know who sent me the documents and the screenshots from your precious secret chats. You have no effing idea. But I do like that you guys are descending into unhinged paranoid lunacy, and it's only a matter of time, and you need to get a grip, and perhaps you should be focusing on the fact that the person currently running the LPNH Twitter account called the now former chair of the party the F word that rhymes with maggot that I'm not going to say on this stream because he was pissed off that the keys to the Twitter got taken away. Perhaps that's actually a more egregious thing than you should be upset about. And then even more egregious than that, the fact that you assholes then staged an internal fucking coup to remove the chair of the party because your feelings got hurt, because you're addicted to Twitter, and then removed the duly elected chair of the party, who was almost unanimously elected like 3 months ago because he took away your precious. Maybe those are things that you should be concerned about, not who has sent me the information and the screenshots that I have, because I promise you that you don't know. I apologize to everyone for the interruption. There's more LPNH nonsense going on. And, they're trying to be detectives and they're trying to get to the bottom of things, of who's leaking information from their precious chat. Let's get back to business. Thank you for allowing me that point of personal privilege. Jen says we should start referring to these folks, FOLX, excellent spelling, Jen, as the folk kitty. I don't know how to pronounce that. Look, it's the folkity folks. Oh, folkity folks. Okay, I might be able to get behind that, Jen. Let's think about it. All right. If you don't know what just that was about, I apologize. I had to take a point of personal privilege. All right, let's go.
Trey, did you want to talk a little bit about rights law?
I did. Sorry, I got caught up in the chat.
No, thank you. I know you're multitasking, providing information here and there, so thank you.
Okay. So if I was going to talk to you about advocacy resources for you going forwards with either your students or your own kids, especially dealing with special education, I would tell you to look at Rights Law. It's a website that is fantastic. I used it a lot when I was both doing my credential and my master's, where you can get really a good database of
Beth, don't cheat.
That is what my Twitter handle is, Educated S. I don't know why that's what it is, but you can get a really good database and index of different services. So they have their special education yellow pages where you can find advocates, you can find attorneys, you can find all different things. And they also have a searchable database of different disabilities and different issues that you might be looking for individually. They have a lot of resources for teachers as well. The other thing that I will always tell you to do is to get copies of your parents' rights. If you are a GSA advisor, if you are a person who is working with these students who have these intersectionalities, especially when we're talking about LGBTQIA+ students who have anxiety or are dealing with mental health challenges as a result. When you're talking about students with really high social anxiety, those are students who probably would benefit from some level of school service. And how to get that is something that they can find through your parents' rights. And it would be a really good thing for you as an advisor or a mentor in that situation to be able to say, hey, this is the steps that you go through in order to get a student assessed for this, or to find out if there is anything the school district can do for you. So if you're not sure of how to go about that, or you're not quite sure what the process would be, I can kind of help you with where you would look for that if you want to shoot me an email or something like that. But that's what I will always tell you, is get your parents' rights and find someone who can explain them to you. I've been threatening to do it for a while on YouTube. I need to get on that.
Well, actually, no, this is actually a really good question that Big Shrimp is asking. Wait a minute, aren't these the people that say fuck parents' rights? So something interesting about this is this person, the black, I'm sorry, I forget their name. Like the black person that's presenting though, they actually kind of sound not to be crazy to me. I know this might surprise people, but this person has already talked about like saying like some complete like this person said earlier, like, you know what? If you have someone that doesn't like trans people in your group, you need to allow them to have their feelings. I mean, I don't approve of like hating someone because they're trans. I don't approve of any of that, but I liked that they said that. And now they're saying like you have to know what your parental rights are. So I want to make this clear to people because these are moments when you really need to be discerning about what's going on, because just because someone is obviously on the progressive left, just because someone is taking place in like is participating in one of these woke trainings, it doesn't actually always mean they're the bad guy. And we need to listen to them, because like we've listened to quite a few trainings where we've had people directly be on the side of parents, advocating for parents, wanting parents involved, that sort of thing. Okay, they're progressive, fine, but it's like they don't understand what they're buying into. They're more useful idiots. And so like you always have to be discerning to not assume that everyone is like the worst of the worst. And I don't think that this person is actually that bad. I could be wrong, but it's just about like, again, we always have to listen to them and not make assumptions based on how they look, or if they have pronouns or things like that. We once did this school investigation into Rochester, New York, and I was like, Rochester, New York is uber woke. And like I really dug into this school, and and we actually ended up finding like a secret school board meeting that had a committee where they had their diversity meeting actually on video. And it turns out that the diversity office in Rochester, New York is run by black women. And these black women were takers of no shit, and they weren't woke at all. And they were doing things called equity, but they weren't actually defining equity in the same way. as like a woke leftist was. And so we actually came out of that training. I was like, I have no problem with what these people are doing. They're involving parents, they're helping parents, they're supporting parents. They want, like, they were literally just trying to help like underserved communities in their school district, and they were calling it diversity and equity, but it wasn't real diversity and equity. And so you always have to listen. Don't just go based off of like what someone is calling it or the title of it. You have to actually hear them out because it might actually be okay. And we want that to happen. Best case scenario is we don't want these people to be activists. We just want them to want to do a good job, you know?
Thank you. And I think that really speaks to what you're talking about at the beginning of this webinar, looking at the availability of resources and access, and how folks on this call and folks that are supportive educators can help to be that bridge. And kind of with that in mind, what advice can you give to educators who want their teaching and their LGBTQ+ advocacy to be more inclusive of disability justice?
So it's my hope that as educators, all of our practice is guided through a lens of equity that recognizes all of the identities that our students and their families and school staff bring into to our communities. And so I think that providing high quality special education services and supports is an issue of equity. It promotes access and opportunity for students with disabilities. And so with that in mind, I have three kind of pieces of advice or comments here. I think the first is that as part of our advocacy to be more inclusive of disability justice, I hope that we as educators become more comfortable using the word disability and understanding that disability is an important part of identity that can intersect with LGBTQ+ identities. The second thing is as educators, we need to engage in ongoing inquiry about how special education is implemented, including who's being referred.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Naruto here. A trans rights activist in San Francisco went to a board of supervisors meeting and spent her entire 2 minutes screaming with a few words at the beginning. I did see some sort of clip of like a crazy SJW person screaming. I did see that earlier today, Naruto, and I just saw your DM. So thank you for that. That really woke me up this morning. You know, it's a nice alarm clock. But yeah, they're crazy. What do you want? I appreciate it.
Who gets identified and who gets served by special education, and recognize that there are systemic inequities that privilege who gets access to certain supports. And so we really need to empower students and parents with the skills and opportunities to engage in advocacy. And then the last thing is, Beckett already mentioned sort of creating windows and mirrors in our curriculum in our school. And so having an inclusive curriculum that recognizes disability and folks with disability. So making sure that when we're thinking about our curriculum, our texts we're using, our conversations about society and justice, that we are regularly bringing disability into that planning and those conversations.
Thank you.
This is my struggle when I teach too. I forget to unmute myself. For me, probably my advice is if you really want your teaching to be reflective and inclusive something, it has to be something that is included in your life. So if you're living that life of disability inclusion and inclusivity and tolerance overall, then it's already part of your classroom, and you're just offering yourself up to your kids. You know, we give them our stories, we give them our experiences, and we hope that those things we provide to them will help them make sense of struggles and concepts that they've never seen before and things that they haven't experienced. So with that said, you're building a classroom setting that radiates equity naturally, because you're looking at every single student that you have as who they are and where they are, and not who you expect them to be or where we expect them to be.
See, this is actually a definition of equity that I could kind of get behind. If by equity, all you mean is that you're looking at students as individuals, then there's nothing wrong with that, okay? But that's not actually what equity means. Does anyone know what equity means? I know you guys will probably know this. Pop quiz. So this person just said that equity is just looking at people as individuals and making sure they have what they need as individuals. Okay, fine. That's not what equity actually means, though. Equity is about the distribution of resources, i.e., tax dollars, to achieve equal outcomes. Not equal opportunity, equal outcomes. That's socialism. That's pulling every one of the high achievers down to a mediocre denominator and assigning more resources to people who are so-called underserved. And in some cases they might be, but in order to also get them to meet that mediocre denominator. And when you're in a society built on equity, you can't have greatness. You can't have the exceptional because everyone has to end in the same place. So it's not the same thing as just everyone shows up and they get an opportunity and maybe they have to work hard and keep their head down and practice. Equity does not incentivize excellence. That's what it is. Now, I truly believe that this person thinks that equity is just about looking at people as individuals. And again, if that's what it actually was, I would be fine with it. But what equity actually is, according and I mean excellent timing, Brooklyn Way, from each according to their ability, to each according to his need. Who said that? From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Who said that? We mentioned him earlier. James Lindsay pissed on his grave. Mox. That's Mox. Exactly. Well done, guys.
One thing that I would definitely say is always remember that everybody has a strength and everybody has something to offer. It might be a tiny thing. Maybe you have a kid who really, really, really likes to sharpen your pencils. Praise that, encourage that. That's a great thing. We have to validate our kids at every level because everything that they are doing is a success for them in some way. And the world is very fast and very, very quick to break them down. They don't need for us to dumb down standards or to remove obstacles from their lives. They need us to teach them how to build ramps and ladders and ask for help so that they can advocate for themselves going forwards. That's really what I would say is don't just fix things for them, teach them how to ask the questions and take the steps to fix things for themselves.
Thank you. That's such an important point.
I think I'll just echo what my fellow panelists said because those are some great answers.
Every time Dylan speaks, I'm like,
about equity. Somebody just asked in the Q&A if we can say some other words. Please use the word disability. People know they have disabilities. It's not a bad word. It's not a dirty word. And let's think about why disability as a construct is seen as this bad thing. It's because society makes us feel bad about being different, but it's not a bad word. And your students probably know that they're different, and it's really
society makes us feel bad about being different. Guys, here's one of the best pieces of advice that I'm going to give to you on this entire stream today. No one makes you feel anything. No one makes you feel anything. Our experience does not create our emotions. Our emotions create our experience. What we should really be teaching disabled kids is that you can feel and achieve and be whatever you want to be, and what you feel and how you experience the world has nothing to do with what other people say and do to you. Because people are always going to be assholes. There are always going to be assholes in every group. And by the way, they're not just assholes to disabled people. They're assholes to normally abled people as well. Everyone experiences assholes. It is not just people who are different. It is not just people who are disabled. It is not just people who are queer. It is not just people who are gender nonconforming. Everyone experiences assholes in life. And what makes you who you are is how you move past that and still make progress towards what you want to do and who you want to be. But the minute that you say society makes me feel bad for being different is the minute that you've just created a giant obstacle in your own way. Nothing makes you feel bad. You cannot feel inferior without your consent. You are not a victim of society. You are not a victim of the world. This is one of the most awful things that we are teaching kids. You are a victim. You are oppressed. You can't be successful unless someone else allows you to be. You can't be successful without an ally paving the way for you to be successful. No. Every single person can be successful in their own right. Every single person can thrive and flourish and feel amazing and love who they are. And what other people think and feel about it really doesn't make a difference. The Philosophist says it's the ideology of insecurity projection. Yes, it is. It's people not wanting to work on themselves and giving themselves the validation that they want from others. If you want validation from other people, give that validation to yourself first.
It's okay to acknowledge that they're different. And then to Trey's point, I think, yes, come at it with a strength-based approach. Everyone is good at something. Everyone's working on something. Whether or not you have a disability, there are things you're good at and there are things you're not good at. And just making sure that your students with disabilities really feel seen and valued in their strengths, help them with the things they are struggling with. Be acknowledged that sometimes people are working on things way past the time you think they should be working on things, and that is okay. And a super okay, someone just said something in the chat actually that I think we're gonna just like pause and talk about right now, which is that somebody said to be person first. And actually we are, like, as a disability community, moving in the exact opposite direction of that. People with disabilities are like really fighting for identity first language. Autistic is not a bad word either. People with autism.
So this is really interesting, and this is something that's so subtle, and I don't want to go by it. So someone in the chat in the training said to Dylan that we want to treat people as individuals. We want a person first ideology. Now that might make sense, except that Dylan is a collectivist. And so Dylan doesn't want a person first philosophy or ideology. Dylan wants an identity based philosophy or ideology. And so now Dylan is making it seem like the entire disability community, which I don't know who exactly elected Dylan to represent the entire disabled community in the world, but Dylan is now training special education teachers to believe that we all need to embrace an identity first philosophy versus an individual first philosophy. This is something that comes up a lot in these trainings. And anytime this comes up where someone wants to take a collectivist approach, they want to see all members of a group as part of a bigger group rather than individuals. It's the exact opposite definition of equity that we just got a couple minutes ago from that Black trainer, right? Anytime you hear this, I want you to hear individual versus collective. I want you to hear socialist versus libertarian, because the battle that we're fighting right now is not left versus right. It's not progressive versus conservative. It's not any of that. It's authoritarian versus libertarian. They are better able to advance their authoritarian ideology when they are looking at people as a collective rather than as an individual. And yes, Gloria, we are going to go back and we're going to listen. Hang on, let me rewind a little tiny bit.
Someone just said something in the chat.
Oh.
Actually, that I think we're going to just like pause and talk about right now, which is that somebody said to be person first. And actually we are, like, as a disability community, moving in the exact opposite direction of that. People with disabilities are like really fighting for identity first language. Autistic is not a bad word either. People with autism do not like to be called people with autism. Huge majority of them like to be autistic. This goes back to my earlier point about asking people with disabilities how to like actually talking to people with disabilities. Neurotypical folks love to use us as inspiration porn for like, let's talk about person first language, and that's just not appropriate. A huge majority, I will get off this, but I think it's important that people know that actually asking people how they'd like to be referred to. A huge number of people with disabilities want to be referred to as a disabled person, and that is fine. And like,
Tim, I love you.
Never gatekeep language from like a person of color or a queer person or a trans person. So I really challenge you not to gatekeep language from disabled people either. A huge number of decisions are often made for people with disabilities without consulting them. Language is one of those things. Please ask people with disabilities how to refer to them. Plenty of people really hate person first language, and as a society, I hope we are moving away from that direction, because it really is fine to like say that someone has a disability. It's not dirty.
So do you see how subtle that is? Do you see how nefarious that is? That shift in mindset? This is another subtle way they instill their ideology into people. Is they're like, every single training that these people do is about moving people from thinking about people as individuals to moving them to thinking about a collective. And it just flows right by, and like, you don't even think about it when you're hearing it unless you know what you're listening for.
Thank you. And I think that's an important, I'm glad that you are addressing that. That did come up also in our Q&A for folks of wondering that. And I remember when I was in special education, classes in undergrad, longer time than I'm willing to admit in a public setting, that we were taught that it was like person first, this is the way. And I think that they, holding space for the evolution of language is something that is resonant overall LGBTQ support. And so being able to understand that like in allyship, we are always
allyship. That's another word that socialists say. Allyship. Sean C., thank you for the super chat. Aren't those the same people who insist on Latinx despite most people of that ethnicity not liking that term? Sean, we don't talk about that, okay? We don't. Latinx barely even ranks on the progressive stack. It's like Latinx is like 4 or 5 identities down from the top of the progressive stack. They don't really matter. Like, we only use them when it's inconvenient, or when it's convenient, rather, not when it's inconvenient. When it's inconvenient, we ignore them. When it's inconvenient, like we don't like the term Latinx, then we can ignore them because they're not really oppressed. But, they'll trot them out if there's a hate crime or something like that.
Is not the experts. And then I think there are different folks, perhaps generationally, are in different communities that have their opinion about
Beth,
that.
That would count as ally. Yes.
Which is and not.
Absolutely. That would count for the bingo card. And Jen, thank you for the super chat. I'm kind of surprised the folkity folks haven't started referring to bio parents, aka the bio parent of the nuclear family, including bio ancestors, as the progenitors. That's interesting, Jen. Now they have stopped. They really want to get rid of the word mother and father. So that's a real thing. And so like, I don't know, like what words are they using in replace of mother and father though? I forget. Does anyone remember? Because I know that they are trying to get rid of those terms. I just don't remember what they replaced them with off the top of my head.
And I think it's important, and I really appreciate you sharing where you're coming from in that frame of reference, and also where you see the disability like community going. That's really valuable. We have a little time, so I'm wondering about some of these other questions. So I'm going to just look through the chat, and I see someone had asked about suggestions for supporting LGBTQ youth whose families are not supportive of their identities. And then also someone asked kind of if they're out at school but not at home, and how to best support them as well. Really models questions.
So the question is, how do we support LGBTQ kids that are not out at home? Let's watch what happens now.
We get around LGBTQ support, but I'm wondering if folks could speak to that in this context.
Yes. So when we're talking about, when you're looking at a student who's out to you but isn't out to their family, be careful, because that's a very, very, very tricky situation that I have found myself in several times. You again need to know where you're at and what the climate of where you're at is. If you're not in a place where your school setting is going to back you, backing that child's identity, should it come out that that's what you did, you need to know that. That doesn't mean you don't do it, but I also would advise you do the very best you can not to lie. You don't want to actively...
See, this person is not bad. This person is not woke. They're not. I really think that this person is just like, I just want to live my life. I just want to help kids. Like, this person quite literally just said, don't lie when it comes to students' gender identities. We don't hear that from woke people. That's good. Excellent.
Don't want to actively confuse parents when they're trying to figure out what's going on with their student.
That's really good advice.
You address that issue with parents at all, more than anything, you tell them to love their kid. You know, everything is a process. Everything is in transition of some kind, from child to adult, from baby to child, from whatever. You're always moving. We're always growing. And that is what I would be telling those parents. You know, the second piece of that is, a lot of times parents think this is something that kids are doing to get back at them. I don't understand that. But you will get a lot of parents who are like, I've told them to stop doing this, and they're not. You just need to reframe that for them and say, do you have a child who would intentionally do something that was making you this upset nonstop for no reason? Is that really who your child is, or is your child someone
who
right,
and
desperately wants you to love them and would do anything to make this okay for you, but you're the one who has the problem with them? And it's very difficult to get parents to that place when they're not ready. They get ready, but you do have to understand that for them, there's a grieving process that they go through. Whether that's right or wrong is irrelevant. It's a process that they go through, and you have to look at everybody's feelings in that situation. You cannot just endlessly push if they're just not ready yet. You have to support both ends.
Thank you. And I want to highlight that there is also a student right to privacy, especially in public school settings. So that if students do not want to go out, want to share identities at school, that is not communicated to them, you actually have a right, an obligation not to share that.
No. I have horrible news that has nothing to do. Meghan Markle is in the United Kingdom. Meghan Markle apparently is in the United Kingdom. Why is Meghan Markle in the United Kingdom? Why is she going to ruin the coronation? Did I tell you? Did I fucking tell you guys or what? Meghan Markle is gonna try to disrupt and usurp the attention. This is horrible. This is horrible news. Why is she in the United Kingdom? Oh my God. There is, so I like, there's my favorite YouTube royal commentator is, his name is River, and he's fabulous. And I don't know what this video says, but River has just posted an emergency update with a picture of Meghan Markle, and it said, Meg will join coronation procession. Harry jets in. What? Fucking Meghan Markle fucking ruins fucking everything. All right, I'm sorry. God damn it.
Information, and we have more information in an open letter actually from the ACLU that we could share if folks are in that place. But I think your point around if the student wants to be supported and having those conversations with some grace and understanding and giving them time to call them in is really valuable. Dylan or Jess, did you want to speak to this or anything to add?
I have a very different perspective on the parent track because A, I am the person with the disability, and B, I think that sometimes even well-intentioned parents accidentally cause harm. So I think that there definitely is a very thin line that often gets crossed of like who gets seen as like the person whose identities and thoughts and beliefs are valued and respected in the conversation. And as a society, the majority of time, that is not the child. And who at the end of the day are we here to serve and make comfortable? And I think I have had some really tough conversations with parents about like, are you really giving your kid the space to be themselves? No. And are you like, I think, you know, as a trans person, I think there's a certain amount of grief that parents need to do when they understand. And oftentimes for parents who have kids who are LGBTQ and have a disability, there's like 2 times the grief of like the processing you need to do of the fact that your kid might not have the life that you wanted for them. And to that, I say, please encourage parents to do that work in therapy and not in front of their kids, and then do the best that you can as an educator to support their kids.
Dylan really hates parents. Dylan does not like parents at all.
Without encouraging their parents, telling their kids that they are not supportive. I think that we as educators have to undo a lot of trauma later, and that we can prevent some of that trauma by being like,
we as educators have to undo a lot of trauma. Does Dylan listen to themselves? It is not your job as educators to undo trauma.
I have zero tolerance in my classroom for you telling your kid you don't support them. And I will support you in finding resources for yourself to deal with this process. But in my classroom, like, your kid is my priority and I'm going to do my best to support them, whoever they are. I think that, and Trey is saying in the chat, it is a tough conversation always. But I think just pushing parents to kind of do that work separately from their kids can be really like life-saving and save kids from having to do their own trauma work and unlearning and unhearing things later.
Thank you. So helpful. Jess, did you have anything to add, or do you feel like...
No, I think those were comprehensive answers.
Becca, there's a question in the chat that I think is a good one, which is, what do you do when your school does not agree that you should be talking about these things? And I know GLSEN has a ton of resources on what you do when your school does not want you to be talking about these things. But I think that is also an important point of the conversation, because a lot of times, like Trey is super right, a lot of parents don't like it, but a lot of times admin or districts, they don't like it either. So I think it's definitely worth, I don't know, if we wanted to talk about that one.
I can definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do, Jess.
I actually answered it a little bit in the chat.
Please.
Someone from Texas had asked a similar question. And I would say in almost all GLSEN trainings I do with teachers, this question comes up of how do you start having these conversations if you have pushback from administrators or parents, or you're worried about pushback? And I think, as I said in the chat, I think it's really, one, having support from your administrators is critical. So if you are in a school or a district where your administrators support having conversations that are about equity and inclusion and diversity and justice, let them know how you're going to be approaching different topics in your curriculum, what materials you're going to use, and make sure that they're going to support you if anything comes up. I think the other thing is, if you are in a difficult spot where you don't have a lot of opportunities, it's finding entry points to these conversations wherever you can and sort of continuing to push those boundaries through those entry points. And I think the other thing is when you're having, when your curriculum is diverse and inclusive and you're representing LGBTQ identities, racial identities, ethnicity, culture, disability, all kinds of different identities, then you can express to parents and to your administrators that we are talking about diversity that exists in our communities, our schools, our state, our country, that these are important conversations to have. They're part of movements and advocacy that's happening around the country. And so it doesn't become the worry of parents, which is unfounded, but you're talking about LGBTQ issues in the class. It becomes, we're talking about inclusion and diversity and justice, and that is part of it.
Thank you so much. Trey, did you say you wanted to add something? I think you're muted.
Yes. So, sorry, they said something else to me and then I got distracted. One of the things that I would tell you to do is to be involved in your union. And I say that because, at least in California, CTA is pretty active for us. And so I was sent by my union to a number of trainings. I went to the LGBTQ caucus in San Francisco, and we had so many different teachers come and present on what are the laws in their states, what are the laws in your state, what are the educational mandates. California has something that says that elementary schools have to have LGBTQ inclusive books in their libraries. I was teaching elementary at the time. I happened to go into the library to look because I had a student that identified as non-binary, and I could not find not one single book to give that child, which meant I had to have a conversation with my librarian as to why we didn't have materials that our state mandates we keep. And so if you have that information behind you when you go to have some of these conversations, if you are active in your union, if you are, I don't know if you're in a state with tenure, that also is the thing, but being active, having those conversations, going to those union meetings and finding out what are we doing. You have an LGBTQ coordinator in your district. Every union has one in their district. So find out who that is and meet with them, because these are actually things that they protect you on and things that they help protect you when you protect your students on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I am noticing the time. So Dylan, did you want to add anything quickly?
Nope. I unfortunately have not had the privilege of working in schools that have really allowed me to do that. So this is more of a learning opportunity.
Thank you. And I think that is a point that a lot of times maybe the folks who are joining us today are the folks who are advocating for this. And one of the steps we can offer, who in your school and who in your administration, who in your district is doing this work and interested in doing it with you as a more cohesive effort. And GLSEN does have resources, as Dylan mentioned, on inclusive policies, on language. We have an elementary educator advocacy resource, which talks about why and what does it look like in elementary, but just looking at some of our resources and some of our recommendations can help you. And also our research statistics are meant to be used by folks who are trying to bring this work to their school and want to say this is something that is happening, that we have statistics on that we need to meet as a school. So any of that work.
No, Dylan does work in
really
schools, just not in those types of schools.
And folks are welcome to reach out to us if you are in an individual place that you'd like to work on your advocacy. And I am just going to wrap this up. We did have these recommendations. Thank you all so much for this incredible conversation.
All right, guys, that's basically it. So we're gonna wrap it there. That actually wasn't as eventful as I thought it was gonna be, but we did still get a few juicy moments in that. Dylan actually managed to rein it in a little bit and was I mean, obviously has some hostility towards parents, but what can you do? But I thought that was a pretty eventful happy hour. Let me know if you have any key takeaways in the chat. Once again, we do happy hours on Fridays on the Cult, where we watch a woke training from start to finish. We listen to what they're saying, we listen to what they're teaching, and we talk about it, because this is how we learn what the woke left is really doing, what they really believe. And even though we have to watch through the boring bits and the cringy bits, it does give us so much more information. So congratulations to everyone who made it through the training. You did it. You're still here. Great job. Now, scheduling note. Now, as I've been saying and threatening, I think I'm going to do coronation stream tonight. I do. I think we're going to do a long form coronation stream tonight. I don't know exactly when it's going to start. It's probably going to start I need to do some math. So I need to look into how long the coronation for King George and Queen Elizabeth was. And I need to look into how long the coronation for the Queen Elizabeth II was. And then what I want to do is I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to get a crown. And we're going to do coronation. And if you don't want to stay up, if it's just too much for you, of course the stream will be there in the morning. But I think I am going to do that tonight, because you know what? Listen, man. Coronation, first time, 70 fucking years. This hasn't happened in 70 years. Come on, we have to watch. We're doing it live, all right? Now, if you don't want to go to coronation, but there is actually, so tomorrow night, so after we do coronation stream and I stay up all night and I get really, really effing loopy, we are still doing our regular Socialism Saturday tomorrow night. Socialism Saturday is on 6 p.m. on Saturdays, so an hour later than usual. And I don't know what we're watching yet, but I'm going to pick something out from Red May, because it's Red May month. And so Red May is an organization in Seattle that does all sorts of the farthest left socialist content that you can possibly have. And so we're going to watch something at 6 p.m. tomorrow, and I'll probably pick it out tonight sometime and announce it. But I have a very special announcement, because we are not just doing Socialism Saturday this week. We are also doing Socialism Live. Socialism Live on Sunday, because Red May is a series of live socialist presentations that they do stream on their YouTube channel. And guess what, guys? Our favorite Abolish the Family socialist is doing a panel with Red May live on Sunday at 2 p.m. So normally I do not stream on Sundays, but we make our exceptions for Sophie. Sophie is crazy. It's fascinating. And there's this presentation called Stepford's Daughters. Does it have a description? Capitalism and patriarchy creates monsters, but inside the darkness, there lurks a strange utopia. And so we are going to live stream our very first Red May live on Sunday at 2 p.m. We're still going to do Socialism Saturday tomorrow, because that's our standard stream. But now we're getting into the month of Red May, and we're going to be doing extra socialism content. And there's also another one on the 11th at 6 p.m. called Palo Alto. And I don't know what that's about, but we're going to look into that there. So you guys ready? Are you excited for an extra month of socialism? It's going to be great. Guys, please mount that like button on your way out the door. I'm going to go take a break, get some dinner, possibly take a little bit of a nap, and I'm going to launch Coronation Stream later tonight, and we're going to watch coronations, and we're going to talk about royal things, and we're not going to talk about woke bullshit for once. And if you're up and you want to spend some time, you can get fancy, you can wear a crown. It's going to be great. And we're going to look at pomp and circumstance and music, and it's going to be awesome. And you have to forgive me. My community knows I am a royal nerd. I really am. It's like my favorite topic. And so I'm just going to nerd out, all right? And we're going to have a ton of fun. All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.